What was the biggest takeaway and what stood out the most when GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll met with the media on Monday? That plus more on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for Tuesday, January 28th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page. We appreciate either one. It's awesome. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of your support, Raider Nation, and on the YouTube side of things, because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, does a phenomenal job. We would not have the page without him. Cannot shout him out enough, but you can hit him up on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, you can. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Plenty of feedback to get to. A lot of calls, a lot of texts. Won't be able to get to them all, but we'll do our best to get to as much as possible. As the dust is starting to settle, GM John Spytek met with the media on Monday. Head coach Pete Carroll met with the media on Monday. About 45 minutes to almost an hour long media session and time that we were over at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. So a lot to get to on today's show. So trust and believe, plenty of feedback, and we'll do that as we close out in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Also, we got an opportunity to catch up to owner Mark Davis, and Mark Davis is really cool where he doesn't speak with the media very often. He's not Jerry Jones. He's not one of these guys that is front and center, wants to talk all the time. He really lets the others do that and really kind of plays the back role, and of course he handles his business behind the scenes, but a lot of time doesn't make himself available. But he did make himself available Monday following the press conference, so it got that sound really good stuff from Mark Davis. You'll hear that coming up, segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and a lot of it is reacting to what I heard and what I seen at the press conference for GM John Spytek and Pete Carroll on Monday. We'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting with the FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today, and I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. But off top, got to talk about the press conference that took place at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll formally introduced to the media and family, and a lot of employees that work for the Raiders as well. Big room full of a lot of people. Marshawn Lynch was there. Max Crosby was in attendance. For anyone who was watching the press conference and wanted to know who yelled out "Raiders," that was Marshawn Lynch. And it's funny, Pete Carroll didn't even recognize that was Marshawn Lynch. He didn't know that it was him. He didn't even know he was there in attendance until after the press conference was over and Pete Carroll was walking down the hallway. Actually, the Raiders have documented this on their social media app, and he walked up behind him, grabbed him by the shoulders, and that's when he realized it was Marshawn Lynch and that he was there and that he was the one that actually yelled out. He had no idea who it was that yelled out, but it was cool to see Beast Mode there on Monday as well. But there was a lot to take away. They met with the media for about 45, 50 minutes, answered any question that we had. I asked about the quarterback position. Pete Carroll and John Spytek were very adamant that, one, they've got the best quarterback that's ever done it in Tom Brady to bounce ideas off of, but they also would not leave any stone unturned when it came to finding their quarterback. And even Pete Carroll said, hey, everywhere I've been, I've had a quarterback that's been very successful, whether that's in college or in the NFL. So they're definitely going to address that. They know that they need to address that. And I love the fact that they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that they have that position solidified. But it's not just about the quarterback position. It's about all the different positions on the team. And really, competition was probably my biggest takeaway from the press conference. It's something that I knew going in that was going to be a big-time conversation piece, was competition. But to hear it reiterated by both GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll, I thought was really good. And it's only going to make this Raiders roster that much better. As a matter of fact, GM John Spytek was asked about the current roster, how much he paid attention to it, and what he's looking for in a Raider. What's his vision for a Raider? Really good answer from the GM, John Spytek.
Well, my job for the past 9 years has been to see the NFL, and it's in totality every year. So yes, I'm familiar with it. We obviously played the Raiders this year in Tampa Bay. My first order of business is going to be getting with Coach here. We're going to talk more about the kind of player we want, what it looks like at every position, the kind of person we want. To me, it's vitally important. You're going to hear, I think, both of us continue to talk about that. What does it mean to be a Raider? What are the qualities that we're going to stand for? What are the qualities that everybody that comes into this building is going to stand for? I take that very personally and very seriously as a responsibility of mine is like the scouts are in charge of finding the right kind of people to bring into an organization. There's no greater responsibility, I don't think, than that. We will be what our character kind of will be our fate, in a sense. And we're looking for first people that love football, that want to compete every day, or there just won't be a place for you here, and that's okay. We want it to be a hard team to make. We want it to be a hard job every day, but for those that are willing to step up to that challenge and be a part of that, there'll be a great reward at the end of it. We've both lived it. We know what it looks like. So I'm less concerned about roster construction right now and, this position or this position. We've got some really good players in this building, really good, and everybody knows that. They know who they are. Our job is going to be to find more of them, but it's going to start with the person.
Love what he had to say, right? I mean, if you love football, you want to compete, you want to work your tail off, there's a place for you on this Raiders team. If you don't, then there's not a place for you. Like, I love the fact that he set the tone with that statement immediately, letting it be known, because there were players there. As I mentioned, Max Crosby was there, Marshawn Lynch was there, Colton Miller, I saw him later on in the cafeteria part of the facility, so I know he was there, and there was obviously other players that were paying attention, but they heard that loud and clear. There's no doubt that they heard that. If you're ready to compete, if you're ready to fight, scratch and claw for your roster, not that you're going to be walking around on eggshells, but just know what your expectations are every day you step into that facility is to compete. And I mentioned it on my radio show Monday afternoon that, can you imagine how much better everyone would be if you were consistently competing for your job? If you consistently knew that you had to go to your job and give your number one effort every single day in order to keep that job, how much better everything would be, right? Because we get so many people in all walks of life and all kind of jobs that get comfortable in their position and then don't really feel like that they have to work very hard. Well, that happens professionally as well. Right? Guys get drafted in the first round. Guys get, big free agent deals or whatever the case may be, or they were hot shots in college and think that they don't have to compete anymore or fight anymore once the guy gets a contract extension, right? We always talk about contract years. Well, the good thing with Pete Carroll and John Spytek, and clearly they share the same vision, is that it doesn't matter. Once you get a paycheck, if you're not out there competing, they're going to make you compete. Right? I mean, you heard what Nate Boyer had to say on the show on Monday after I had him on my radio show on Friday about the competition that Pete Carroll puts out there. I had Robert Turbin, former running back of the Seahawks, a guy who won the Super Bowl with Pete Carroll. He said, man, look, as I was a backup running back to Marshawn Lynch, and I knew that I always had to go in there and I had to compete and I had to fight and I had to scratch. And he's all, it wasn't a bad thing. It made me better, but I knew that I can go from being the number 2 running back to being the number 3 running back if I didn't bring it. So I had to bring it. It made me a better person. And all I could think of, and I share this story all the time for anyone who's been listening to this show for a really long time, when I was a part-time guy in radio, I was the most dangerous dude in the building. Because, one, I was the hungriest dude in the building. I wanted to prove that I should be full-time, and I wanted to prove that I was better than everybody else. And not that I was, but in my mind I was. In my mind, I had to prove that. So I was always competing with them and competing with myself. So if you were going on vacation, guess who you didn't want filling in for you? Me. If you were sick, guess who you didn't want filling in for you? Me. Because I was proving, or at least I was out to prove, that once you're not there, we ain't going to miss a beat. We ain't going to miss a beat. Matter of fact, we might even improve. Might even get a little bit better. So that's the kind of guys that Pete Carroll and John Spytek are going to be looking for, guys that are willing to compete. As a matter of fact, Pete Carroll said those exact words. If you're willing to compete, this is the place for you. Here's Pete Carroll at his press conference.
If you don't want to compete, you're in the wrong place. And our players will understand that early on. When we went to Seattle, we went through a lot of transactions, and it was to find the right people. John and I are in total concert of the kinds of people that are going to build this program. We're going to build this program around. And so there's a way to get to that, and we've been through this, and it's really exciting to have the opportunity to do it again. Why, you asked, okay, why would I want to do it again? That it's because it's that chase and that pursuit of the passion that we want to find. So
again, I love that. I love the competition aspect. Right? There's no scholarships in the NFL. Scholarships are for college, and I know that it's more professional now that it's NIL, but scholarships are for college. There's no scholarships once you get to the league. You could be undrafted. You could be drafted highly in the first round, second round. You could be a late round pick. And when Pete Carroll had his very successful teams in Seattle, how many of those guys had chips on their shoulder? Right? Russell Wilson was a 3rd round pick. Guys like Richard Sherman was a 5th round pick. Guys weren't all drafted in the first round that were on those teams, defensively and offensively. Guys that their names weren't really that big when they arrived in Seattle, but all of a sudden they turned it into something. Right? There was a bunch of guys that were cast-offs. castaways. Oh, they didn't really quite fit the mold, right? Similar to what Max Crosby is with the Raiders, right? A guy that was drafted in the fourth round, a guy who believed he should have been drafted higher. So he's always had that chip on the shoulder. That's what you have to have, that kind of mentality of, I'm never going to quit. I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to slow down. I'm going to keep go, 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 go. That's the kind of mentality that they're bringing to the table between GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll. I think it's a really good synergy to have. I think Raider Nation should get excited about it. GM John Spytek has so much success being a part of what they were building in Tampa Bay as far as going through the draft and finding those kind of guys. I think that this process that they're going to go through this year in putting this team together is going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. I look forward to following every step of the way. And, you know, if you go back to the first year, Pete Carroll in Seattle, he had like 300 different roster like moves and changes that they made in the first year, right? From guys being elevated from starter to second string to third string, practice squad, released, brought in, whatever the case may be. They went through a lot of changes because, again, competition. And we know that Pete Carroll has plenty of energy. He let it be known he was tired of that number 73 on his back. Yes, he knows he's the oldest coach in the league. That doesn't matter. He's so fired up. He's so excited. He's so ready to get to work. And I do think that the synergy that they have between GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll is a good thing. And I think that that's how they're going to put this roster together. So they're going to go through the current guys on the team, and there's going to be a couple of guys that are going to make it and a couple of guys that are going to still be. And I think they're going to really turn over this roster, right? And so they have, 29 free agents? So you know how easy it is to turn over a roster when you have that many free agents? Some guys, like I said, will stick. Some guys won't. And that's okay because that's what they've got to do. They've got to find the guys that are going to fit the bill with what they want to do. Another big thing that Pete Carroll was asked about was putting his staff together. That's been a question that people have asked me about. How is they putting the staff together? What are they doing? What do you know about that? And really, we don't know much. He did mention that he's working on it right now, but he said he wants people that has worked with him. He wants guys that have not worked with him. And he also wants some of the coaches that are currently on the staff, some of the really good coaches that can help them with, all right, who this guy is, what this guy brings to the table, really kind of weed in and out what they need. And, you know, it's funny, I was listening to JT the Brick and Eric Allen after the press conference. They were doing a phenomenal show from the Raiders facility, and JT asked Eric Allen about some of the coaches that are currently on the staff, and EA said, look, when you go through a coaching change, you don't have to get rid of all the coaches. You blow out the coaches that you think are replaceable, but the ones that you stick with are the ones that you look at their position group and they continue to get better. So I look at, when I heard that, it made me think of Robbie Leonard, Patrick Graham, right? Guys like that, guys that have succeeded in a major way, even with, you know, the injuries to Max Crosby, injuries to Christian Wilkins, injuries to Malcolm Kuntz, Tyree Wilson still trying to figure things out, K'Lavon Chason being picked up off waivers, but that D-line continued to thrive, right, with Adam Butler and John Jenkins there. These guys all of a sudden played major roles. That's Robbie Leonard. Well, no shock that the Raiders are interviewing Robbie Leonard for their open defensive coordinator position. They're still also talking to Patrick Graham. Like, he's in the mix as well. We know that he didn't get the Jaguars job. Liam Cohen got that, and he didn't get the Bengals defensive coordinator job either. So there's a chance that maybe Patrick Graham returns. There's a chance that Robbie Leonard could come back. I would look at those two guys and say, would love to see those guys back. I think that they did a really good job with what they were working with. They also asked to interview Carl Scott, the Seahawks defensive back coach. He was for their defensive coordinator vacancy, and this is according to Jonathan Jones from CBS Sport. Scott worked for Nick Saban before joining Pete Carroll back in 2021. So those are 3 interviews for the defensive side of the ball that we know about as of right now. Carl Scott, the Seahawks defensive backs coach, also Robbie Leonard, the defensive line coach for the Raiders for their DC, and also Patrick Graham still in the mix. We'll find out more and more. We'll hear about the requests that are being put out there. We'll see who they're interviewing and see how quickly they could put this thing together. But Pete Carroll mentioned guys that he had worked with, familiarity, guys that he weren't necessarily familiar with. So for anyone who thinks that he's married to a certain type of style, like a cover 3, it has to be a cover 3, and that means Gus Bradley's returning. That's not necessarily true. Darrell Bevel, a guy that's been questioned and asked about here on the show before, who's been an OC for him. Not necessarily that he has to go that direction. I'm not saying he's not going to go in that direction, but he doesn't necessarily have to go in that direction. He's not necessarily married to that either. And then, you know, guys that are on the current staff. And I look at a couple in Patrick Graham and Robbie Leonard that I'd very much be interested in seeing return to the Silver and Black, just because I think they do a really good job. And who knows what, you know, Patrick Graham's next role could end up being at some point or other. But I thought he did a really good job, especially with all the injuries that he dealt with the Raiders in 2024. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just a quick review of the press conference. And look, it was 45 to 50 minutes long, so we'll have sound from that presser all week long, stuff that we can just, pull a little sound here and then talk about it, what they had to say about that, what I think it means, all that. We've got plenty of time to break it down. The offseason is a long offseason, and we're going to be here every single day. So we'll continue to break it down. Obviously, we'll get your thoughts as well at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts are coming up in segment number 3. Coming up next, though, Mark Davis, the owner, doesn't talk with the media much. He talked on Monday. You'll hear that next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that is FanDuel. And we know Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. You can even bet on the length of the national anthem. That's actually something I've done each and every year for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's a lot of fun. Normally, it's around 1:30. We always do kind of the over-under on that. So just another little area to pay attention to. Right now, you can download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into Mark Davis. Had an opportunity to speak with the media on Monday following the John Spytek and Pete Carroll press conference. Again, he doesn't talk with the media very often, so whenever we get a chance to catch up with them, we like to do that. So there's a group of us, Vic Tafer, Tashawn Reed, myself, Paul Gutierrez, a couple others. Ed Graney from the Las Vegas Review-Journal does a great job. We were all there, had a chance to catch up with MD, and he started off by talking about the new ownership group, which is something that John Spytek and Pete Carroll referenced quite a bit in their press conference on Monday. So here's Mark Davis talking about the new ownership group.
Tom Wagner and Egon and Mike, they're just brilliant business people. And they were going to add to the infrastructure of the business side of this organization as well as some things on the other side. But bringing in Tom Brady was bringing in somebody that was on the football side that I had been lacking having here at the organization. Back in, I guess it was 18, with John Gruden. He was somebody that I brought in and really expected to be that person on the football side that would bring stability to the organization. He had a 10-year contract and all that, and his head was chopped off. And we were put in a really bad position as an organization. And we tried to get it right with Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. That didn't work out. Antonio Pierce was given the interim job, and I believe the job that he did as the interim coach warranted him earning the job as head coach of the Raiders. Last season didn't go as we had hoped it would. 3 teams in our division were in the playoffs. The Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 3rd time in a row. And we just felt there was time for a change. So now I go back to the infrastructure that we've built up here in the organization over the during the season with the people that we brought in. We also, the process was a little bit different this year in going after the head coach. We hired Corn Ferry and a fellow by the name of Jed Hughes. And Jed helped us to identify and coordinate certain people that we were interested in interviewing, as well as some that they had on their thing. And so the interview group was myself, Tom Brady, Mike Meldman, Egon Durbin, and Tom Wagner, with help in the background with Sandra Morgan, and Larry Delson, and Tom Delaney. And we went through a very rigorous process of interviewing people. And by the time we were done, we knew that it was going to be, there were 3 or 4 people that we were truly interested in. And when one person made a decision to go to another team, it became clear that Pete was going to be our guy. And on the other side of the coin, Spytek, John Spytek, really impressed us from the get-go. And so he was chosen as the general manager.
I'm sure you've known Pete for a long time. What stood out in this process, as far as getting to know Pete and the interview process, and what stood out for you?
The interview with Pete was one of the first ones we did. It might have been the first one we did. And his energy was amazing. It's funny, when my mom found out Carroll was going to be the head coach. My mom's Carroll Davis. She just turned 93. She thought we were talking about her. But I told her, no, we're doing Pete Carroll because we're looking for youth. So that's how that worked out. But Pete, I've watched Pete for a number of years. I watched him at USC. And where I really watched him was when he was at Seattle and competing with the 49ers. And the Niners were the bully on the block. And Seattle actually was one of the one teams that figured out how to beat him and beat him pretty damn good. So I was impressed with Pete's, again, he brings up the word competitiveness. And I think that shows throughout his career. And he's a football guy. He loves football. And he wanted to be a Raider.
Mark, how have you changed over your process as an owner?
Well, every day you learn. And you just try to learn from things, and that's what you do.
Did you think you had Ben Johnson?
What's that?
Did you think you had Ben Johnson?
No, we didn't think we had Ben Johnson. We never made an offer to Ben Johnson. And he's a Chicago Bear.
When you looked at John Spytek and what he was able to help do in Tampa Bay, building up all those draft classes, how did you imagine him being able to do that here? Well,
I'm hoping he can do it here, and that's why he's here. Again, he worked with Tom Brady there. He brought Tom Brady in with the group there, and to Mike's chagrin. But, they won a Super Bowl. But everything I've heard about him from other people and talking to people outside the organization and other organizations, he's a home run.
One thing Pete said, he made it clear a few times that he's going for it immediately, trying to win right away and trying to go all in to do so. Is that sort of the message that you sent? It's kind of an edict for them to take on?
No, that's not the message that we sent. We want to build something here. And again, that's been the process and the mindset all along. Like I said, it got offset or, kind of blown up when John Gruden was sent away. And so we've been trying to get it right since then. And we'll see. But I've got patience to get it right. And I think we've got the people now. Again, I've always felt that. And results are what speak to me. And that's what we'll see. But I'm really excited about it. And hopefully this won't be an annual thing.
Mark, I guess talk about the humility it takes as owner to defer to guys like Tom Brady, and maybe some owners would want to have the finals run a tight ship in that way.
Well, I'd like to say that again, I've been telling you all ever since the beginning of this that the one thing I know is what I don't know, and I'm going to surround myself with people that do know those things, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to do their job. And I give them vision, goals. We talk about those things, but results are what speak. And so it's fairly easy to do that if you understand where you are. I've been around some great football people in my lifetime. When you talk about my father, you talk about John Madden, you talk about Tom Flores, you talk about Ron Wolf, and all of these people have helped me along the way. And so I know what it takes and all of that. And I think we've got the infrastructure now in this organization to move into the future.
When Pete was in Seattle, what he talked about was his culture and what he built culture-wise, players, everyone said that. What do you want the culture to be under Pete? Well,
again, it's the Raider way under Pete. Pete is somebody that is a winner on and off the field. And he builds a culture. I think Antonio Pierce was building a culture here with the players. And that was important. I think we had to continue to build upon that. I will say this, that team last year did not quit. And that was really one of the toughest things about making the change, was the fact that they played for him. And, it's something that I'll always be grateful for. But we'll see what we build here, but it's still the Raiders. And that's something that everybody's got to remember.
They mentioned quite a bit in the pressers their love for football. They have to have guys that love football. You mentioned a bunch of guys that help influence you in football. Did you kind of get that same sense when you were hearing that for love for football guys?
I did, and I think that was one of the criteria that was given to Korn Ferry from us. That had to be one of the ingredients that the candidates have.
And Mark, when you say it's important to remember we're still the Raiders, what does that entail when it comes to merging that philosophy with whoever's incoming like Pete?
Well, commitment to excellence, pride and poise, just win. Greatness of the Raiders is in its future. Those are all things that are not just statements, but they're something that we live by. When you talk about Raider fans, they're not just football fans, they're fans of a way of life. And it's something that we remember around here at all times. The most valuable asset we have is our alumni. And it's their blood, sweat, and tears that helped build this building right here, built that magnificent stadium, and everything else. It's things we'll never forget. So that's what it is. It's about family. It's about being a Raider. It's once a Raider, always a Raider.
When you were going through the interview process with John and with Pete, was there something that pleasantly surprised you that you learned about him that really struck out to you?
I think a lot of things, actually. I thought Pete's energy, but also Pete's again, love for the game and how badly he wanted to be a Raider. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. He wanted to be a Raider. And John, again, just at meeting him for the first time through the interview process, I was very impressed with his desire to work hard and build it the right way. So those were the things that, I'm not saying they were surprising to me, but they were attributes that I was very impressed with.
You mentioned it was hard to move on from Antonio. Same with Tom Telesco. Was it a tough decision also?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, they both did good things. I mean, Tom did a great job in the draft and everything else, but there's more to the job than that. And I'm grateful for him for what he did for us in the draft and those things. I'm grateful for what Antonio's done for this organization. I really am. And I absolutely wish them the best.
Again, it's not often that MD speaks with the media, so I thought it was important to bring to the table. I thought it was also really cool the way that he talks about John Gruden and what his plans were with him when he gave him the 10-year contract and how that obviously fell apart with the whole email situation. Also, his plans with Josh McDaniel and Dave Ziegler. Obviously, that didn't go the way that he expected. And he also gives the flowers to Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco. Again, I thought that was really big too, especially when he's talking about AP and helping create the culture. And he said he did that, right? Obviously, the results weren't there. They needed more results. 3 teams in the AFC West were in the playoffs. Obviously, the Raiders weren't. They weren't able to get a division victory, so they had to go in another direction. But I thought that just him showing that respect to the previous staffs that have come in and tried to get it right, I thought was a good thing. Also, I love the fact that he acknowledged, hopefully this does not become a routine. And what he means by that is, you know, the press conference for the new GM and the new head coach. This is 3 years in a row. New GM, new head coach, 3 years in a row. You don't want to continue to make that a habit. This has got to be something that, they lock in on and they get it right and they allow this thing to grow. And the good thing, Raider Nation, is that head coach Pete Carroll let it be known in the press conference he wasn't really interested in a long, drawn-out, big rebuild, right? I mean, again, I've called it a rebuild, but he's looking to get this thing turned around quickly, right? He's got a 3-year deal with a 4th year for the team option. He's not trying to, take 4 or 5 years to build this thing up. He's really trying to get this done quick, fast, and hurry. So that's a good thing. That, to me, means that they're going to spare no expense, and they've got a lot of money in salary cap space this upcoming offseason. They've got at least double-digit draft picks, at least 10 that they're going to have for this draft. So that means that they can have a lot of flexibility and move around if they need to trade up, trade back, whatever the case may be. They have those options. So they can really do some heavy lifting this offseason with this roster, and obviously with the players that they have too, that they have to go through with the fine-tooth comb and decide who's coming back and who's not coming back, what they're going to do with Max Crosby and his contract situation where he doesn't have any guaranteed money. But I'll tell you, man, seeing Max there at the presser, seeing Max talk to Pete, seeing Max talk to John Spytek, got a really good feeling about how he's feeling about the hire. And again, that's been a question, and I think it's a reasonable question. And really, it's been a question because he opened it up, right? I heard someone hit me on Twitter, was like, well, I hope this stops the Max Crosby trade stuff. I said, well, it's a good sign for sure, but he's the one who opened it up, saying that he wants to see who is going to be hired, see what direction they're going to go, what their plan is, but also they got to talk about his guaranteed money, and that's still something that hasn't been addressed. So I do think that he likes to hire. From his body language, the way that he was speaking with them following the press conference, he really looked like he was liking what he was hearing from him. So that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, they do have to figure out the money situation. But I do feel really good that he's feeling positive about the direction that the team is going under John Spytek and Pete Carroll. And when it comes to competition, there's one dude whose name screams competition. That's Max Crosby. So that's going to be right up his alley. There's no doubt about that. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next. 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the show, and that is LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clocked out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Right now, post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro's tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find quality hires. Right now, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Up first, Sacktown Mark. He's calling to react to the news of Pete Carroll getting hired and has a message that he wants to send to Raider Nation. Here he is, Sacktown Mark.
Hey, Q, this is Sacktown Mark. I just wanted to react to the news of the Raiders getting Pete Carroll as their head coach. Seems like we got our guy, but I have a message for all of Raider Nation, and I know Tom Brady and Mark Davis probably aren't hearing this, but for the fans that are listening to this message right now, please have patience. Because with this roster, it's not going to be a one-year turnaround. Pete Carroll has won a Super Bowl. He's also won in college, but even then, he's not a miracle worker. Okay, let's be realistic. This is going to take multiple seasons to get and be competitive. We have some pieces, but we're not quite there. But he's the right guy who can really lead us in the right direction along with Tom Brady and Spytek. So we got to have patience. This is not going to be immediate. We can't be out here calling for him to get fired after they lose, 7 games this next season or 8 games or 9 games or however many they're going to lose, maybe even more than that. It's not going to be pretty next year, probably, most likely. I could be wrong. I hope I am, but more than likely, still going to be struggle city for the Raiders, and that's okay. That's all right. At the end of the day, I think this is the right move. We just got to be patient, give them time. That's all I got to say. Anyways, Q, thank you for all that you do. Thank you, Ari, and go Raiders.
Mark, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. Yeah, patience is going to absolutely be needed, right? I know nobody wants to hear that, Raider Nation, because it's been 20-plus years. I get that. But as I've mentioned so many times, when you hit the reset button, you're starting over. Every single time you hit the reset button, you're starting over. So as much as our patience is not there because it's been so long, because we've been along for the whole ride, they haven't, right? John Spytek, Pete Carroll, this is their first go-around at this with the Raiders. So, there's going to be some patience that's going to be needed, but both of these guys, especially Pete Carroll, is a proven winner, and obviously John Spytek has come from winning. So if anybody can get it turned around, I would expect it's going to be these guys. I feel very confident about the team and the organization being in their hands. But thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Mike True in the 562. So what's up, Q? It's Mike True from the 562, just texting in with a question on the likelihood for us retaining defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. With the Jags signing Cohen, do you think it's a higher possibility for PG to come back, especially with the signing of Pete Carroll? I'm texting this now. There's only one head coaching spot available. That's in New Orleans, so he's not getting that title with this team this cycle. I think the continuity of keeping him would be huge, allowing Pete to focus on the areas we are weak of. Of course, him being a great DC has eyes coming in from other teams to see if they could possibly snag him as well. But do you think it'd be a smart move to bring him back if we could, or would you more so trust Pete to bring in his guys? That's Mike True in the 562. And Mike, thanks for the text. And yeah, I think it'd be great if they could bring Patrick Graham back. I really do. As I said, he's still in the mix for the defensive coordinator. Robbie Leonard's in the mix as well. And then they're also requesting to talk to Carl Scott from the Seahawks, the defensive backs coach. So Pete could bring in his own guys. I trust who they hire. I really do. Now, there's a couple guys like Gus Bradley. I don't think that they need to bring him back again. He's predominantly the cover 3, and the cover 3 really isn't as effective as it used to be when the Legion of Boom was doing what they were doing. I don't really see that. So, but I do trust who he's going to bring in and why he's going to bring him in. He knows that it's important to get this thing turned around immediately. So I don't think he's going to leave any stone unturned, and I think that he's probably open to a lot of different possibilities. But we'll see. Thanks, Mike, for the text. I appreciate you. Up next, got a call from T-Doug or T-Dub in Cali. Not too sure, but he's calling to react to the presser that he saw from GM John Spytek and head coach Pete Carroll. Here he is, T-Doug or T-Dub out of Cali.
Hey, Q. This is T-Doug in California. Love the show, man. Listen to you every single day, and I appreciate the hard work you put into this podcast. Without the podcast, I really don't know what I'd listen to every morning. But I saw the Pete Carroll and Spytek press conference, and I was impressed. What they say, once you get out, they reel you back in with fancy words, and here I am falling for it again. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds for the Raiders. I like a lot what Pete was saying, about the quarterback position. It's about building around them. I also was listening to Pete on the JT the Brick show, and I really liked what he was saying about, the Jalen Hurts comparison. We really just have to work on, taking pressure off the quarterback and building around him, because, we below the quarterback position and put so much pressure on them when it's the hardest position to play. And we all want to have the next Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, but it's not so simple to get those guys. So what do you do to make up for it? You get a good run game, a good O-line, D-line, defense, yada, yada, yada. But I like that he said that. He was really self-aware about it. And as a fan, that makes you feel good. It's not just quarterback or bust. It's, get the best guy available and build around him. Get us a fighting chance and get back to competing. Competing is where it's at. I just want to be able to watch a Raiders team compete and win, obviously, but at least be in the conversation all the way to December. And I'm hoping Pete Carroll can get us there. Yeah, really excited, and thanks for taking my call. Go Raiders.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. Sorry I couldn't really quite make out your name. Like I said, it's either T-Doug or T-Dub, but I appreciate the call either way. And, yeah, I do like what I heard about the quarterback, and I asked about the quarterback position very early in the presser, just to get the thoughts on from Pete Carroll and from John Spytek on the quarterback position. And, they gave a real lengthy answer. As a matter of fact, I know I didn't play it in segment number 1 when I played a couple other sound bites, but here is what John Spytek and Pete Carroll had to say about trying to find their next quarterback and that leader of the team, how important that is.
I'd go back to that. I mean, I got a chance to be around, in my opinion, the greatest player ever. And it was a love of the game and a competitive desire that just didn't allow him to quit. He was never out of a fight. He was willing to do things that the ordinary football player person wasn't willing to do. And, we're gonna turn over every stone to find that leader for this team too. There's just going to be certain requirements of the job, and it doesn't necessarily take the strongest arm or the best thrower. It's the guys that will push their teammates to a place that's uncomfortable, that will give almost anything to win. That's what the best ones do, and we're going to find one of those.
Yeah, I would add to that it's our mission to build this football team up around the quarterback position. It isn't the only spot. We happen to have the greatest of all time to help us and to see clearly, and we're gonna lean on Tom as much as we possibly can for his insights, because nobody has the insights that he has. He's that unique. But it's the quarterback position is one of the positions on the team, and we've got to make it all fit together well. I've had pretty good success with my quarterbacks in the past. You can go all the way back to college days, and they've all turned out to be really extraordinary members of our club. There's a way to embrace the challenge that the quarterback has from the rest of the football team as well. We need to support our guy, and we need to do what we can to make that work. It's really about making a great football team around the quarterback position. Coach Walsh taught me a long time ago that it's the hardest position in professional sports to play, and so we need to make it as easy for them as possible. And we'll go about doing that by running the football, protecting them, taking care of the ball, playing great defense, and kicking the football when we want to kick it. And there's a lot that goes into this, but to think about how fortunate we are to have Tom Brady with us, it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So that was what they had to say about it. Again, a very lengthy answer when it came to finding the quarterback. They know how important that position is. But what's encouraging to me is that in Seattle, Pete Carroll had Matt Flynn, signed him to a big free agent contract, and then they went and drafted Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. Russell Wilson beat out Matt Flynn, so they rolled with who they believed in, which was Russell Wilson. 2 years into Russell Wilson's career, they're winning the Super Bowl. I'm not saying it's going to work like that with the Raiders, but they're not married to, well, we just gave you big money, so you have to play you. Or we just drafted you really high, so we have to play you. Like, literally, the best guys are going to play. And that's what we've heard from every single person that we talked about to when it came to Pete Carroll. It didn't matter if it was Stacey Joe Ross from Seattle Sports. Didn't matter if it was Richard Sherman. Wasn't matter if it was Nate Boyer. I talked to Robert Turbin on Monday. Like, it didn't matter who it was. I talked to Eric Williams on Friday, who covered Pete Carroll when he was in when he was in Seattle. He covered him for ESPN. I mean, everybody I talked to a T says the same thing about Pete. He doesn't care where you come from, how you got there. If you don't compete, if you don't, put your best foot forward, only the best 22 guys are going to play, obviously 11 on each side of the ball. So that's something I think that's a positive about the direction that the team is moving forward. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Peter in Winnipeg. Says, hey, Q, Peter from Winnipeg here. Like most Raider fans, I love the Pete Carroll hiring. I'm wondering if you think the Raiders might hire an OC or DC that Carroll will almost groom to take over when he's done. Someone like Doug Peterson or even Patrick Graham. I'd be totally fine with this if the team was successful during Carroll's run. It'd be nice to be able to build and sustain a similar culture. And if the team isn't successful, they can do a regular search. It's nice to finally feel confident the team is actually going in the right direction. Anyway, take care, Q. All the best, and go Raiders. That's Peter in Winnipeg. And I think all options are on the table. I also think that they're going to probably hire people. They're going to try to put this thing together under Pete Carroll, and whatever happens after that, happens after that. Right? If they feel like that they have someone that could take over and be a successor, cool. Then they'll highly consider that. If they don't, then they won't. If they think they have a really good DC or good OC, but they're not ready to be a head coach, they'll go in another direction. But as I've said many times, he's got a 3-year deal with a 4-year team option. So if he's doing really well, he's really successful, and he still wants to go, I'm sure he'll go all 4 years. And if the Raiders get a head coach that goes for 4 years, that's already a win, because there hasn't been a coach that's gone for 4 years with the team for a very long time. So that, to me, would be a huge victory if they can get him to coach out his whole contract. And then they have to come up with the issue of, well, who's going to take over, right? Is it going to be someone that is a succession plan already on staff, or do you have to do a search plan, right? And if they did, I'm sure they could find somebody that, has similar beliefs. And, John Spytek, that probably means that he's been a very successful GM, and he'll obviously have a really good idea of what he's looking for in the next head coach. Again, if they get 3 or 4 years down the road, that's a great problem to have, as far as I'm concerned. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate it. We'll close out with a call from PT in Danville. He's calling to talk about the press conference and what stood out to him about the process. Here he is, PT in Danville.
This is PT in Danville giving you another call. I listened to the press conference today where they introduced Pete Carroll and the new GM, and I'm really excited about it. I noticed that a lot of the interviews, when they were asked about it, who interviewed you and what the process was, they brought up Tom Brady, but it seemed like it was the input of a lot of other key stakeholders. One thing that Mark Davis probably led in the past. So I'm really happy to see a transfer in responsibilities there to interview. There seemed like there were people out there that just when they touch stuff, it turns to gold. Well, I don't think Mark Davis is one of those, so having the voice of others will be really big for us. I could tell that, or I got the feeling that Mark Davis really didn't want to let go of Tom Telesco, but it sounds like he's listening to the other owners and stakeholders of the group. So very excited about the future. It seems like a bit of a start of a culture shift, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 to 4 years. Thanks, Q. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Danville, California. Represent. Stand up one time. PT, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And, yeah, there was definitely a lot of voices, especially in the new group ownership, plus the search committee that was helping find the GM and the head coach, right? It just sounds like there was a lot going on, but it was positive a lot, right? It wasn't just a lot of voices that, like, old heads that just wanted to talk and just be heard. No, it was guys that have some kind of, football skins on the wall, right? Like the search firm that was looking for the coach and the GM. Like they've been there, done that. As we talked about before, they've helped place coaches like Andy Reid, like Pete Carroll, others at different locations. So I just think that they had a really good plan. They had a really good approach. You heard Mark Davis in segment number 2 talk about some of the non-negotiables when they were looking for their guys, what the criteria was that they were looking for. I think all of that really worked out really well. And, obviously Mark Davis had a big say in it because he's the owner, but there was a lot of other people that are smart businessmen, owners, owners as far as owning businesses, not necessarily owning football teams, that all had a little bit of say and arrived at John Spytek and Pete Carroll. And to me, it was a very positive on Monday, their press conference, and a way to get in to see what they're going to do next. Obviously, they got to put together a staff. They got to look at the staff they have, see who they want to retain, who they don't want to retain, and I'll be very interested to see who that is, and then go from there, right, and start putting this team together, right? It's the offseason for the Raiders and every other team that's not Philadelphia and Kansas City, and it's time to get cooking. right? I mean, there's the Senior Bowl's going on, the Shrine Bowl was going on, all that stuff. So those are all-star showcases. Trying to worry about the draft. You also got to worry about free agency coming up, the combine's coming up. There's a lot coming up that the NFL doesn't sleep. And if you sleep, and I know these guys aren't sleeping, but if you sleep, you'll get left behind. So you can't do that. Coming up tomorrow, Raider Nation, we'll continue with our calls, our texts, our feedback. We'll deep dive into some more of the press conference for Spytek and Pete Carroll, and take a couple sound bites here and there, and we'll talk about them and break them down and really talk about what we think it means. Obviously, we'll continue to follow and monitor the coordinators, who they're requesting, who they might be bringing in, who they're who they could be potentially hiring to try to fill out the staff, and we'll just keep the bad boy rolling as we do. This machine never slows down, the NFL that is, and neither does this one here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.